Are you seeking dopamine hits from your phone? Do you know what dopamine hits are? Join us for today's episode as we review the Guardian article, Constant Craving: How Digital Media Turned Us All into Dopamine Addicts.
Welcome to the Jesus People Sisterhood podcast, a place where Christian single women aged 50 plus connect. I am your host, Janine Jordan, a Christian confidence coach and leadership mentor in Alberta, Canada.
And I'm your co-host, Ellie McCormick, a Christian longevity coach and mentor in the USA. Being single women over 50, we know what it's like to feel overlooked, to have unrealized dreams, to experience the challenges of singlehood, and to be concerned about what our future will look like. We couldn't find anything online for single Christian women over 50, so we created Jesus People Sisterhood just for you, a place where sisters encourage and empower one another through the last third of life, because you are a treasure trove of wisdom and of exceedingly great value. This is an authentic community, a supportive family, with other women on the same journey where Jesus is the center of it all. Here you will find real talk, real community, and real sisters.
Join us as we discuss building relationships, whole health, and growing spiritually. We'll review helpful books and articles, chat with guest speakers, share success stories, and have some laughs along the way. So grab your favorite beverage and we'll get started.
Welcome, sisters, to this episode of the Jesus People Sisterhood podcast, the only podcast specifically for single Christian women over 50. Today, we give a shout out to our sisters in Arkansas and Singapore. Thank you for listening. We're so glad that sisters from around the world are downloading the podcast.
Ellie and I were discussing dopamine hits and the effects of smartphones and social media on our lives. The topic came up recently after I attended a seminar for educators where it was discussed. Ellie mentioned dopamine hits and sensing her own addiction to her phone, not knowing that I'd just learned about that very topic at the seminar. We did some searching on the topic and found an article in The Guardian from August 2021 titled, Constant Craving: How Digital Media Turned Us All into Dopamine Addicts. But before we discuss the article, what interested you to look into dopamine hits, Ellie?
Well, I think I was probably scrolling. So many things I come across, and I don't remember how or where or what I was looking at. But I saw something about dopamine hits, and I must have clicked on it, and it was talking about how we get these dopamine hits in our brain, which is this reward chemical, and people talking about being addicted and how they needed to detox from it. Of course, one of the big things that people are getting dopamine hits from are our phones, are being addicted to looking at our phone. I'd actually realized that before even seeing this, that that's me. I think I really do have this. I notice it in myself of whatever I'm doing, I'm not on my phone, and then my mind wanders to check your phone, like almost a voice in my head saying, check your phone, and I just do it even without thinking, this constant checking on my phone. And I probably thought, hey, well, I'm not as bad as other people, which could be true, but I still don't like the idea that I'm having, I think, a minor addiction to my phone. So that's what led me to bringing it up with Janine, thinking, how am I going to overcome this? Because I don't want to be addicted to anything. And then bringing it up, and what causes the addiction or the attraction is this dopamine hit that you get. And then it just so happened that she had gone to the seminar too. So kind of felt like, hey, maybe this is a topic the Lord wants us to bring up, because I'm sure there are so many people, as talked about in this article, so many of us are addicted to our phones now. So we came across this article, and it's called Constant Craving: How Digital Media Turned Us All into Dopamine Addicts. when looking for information on the topic. And the article is about an interview with Dr. Anna Lemke, a world-leading expert on addiction. It's written by Jamie Waters, who's a self-confessed iPhone addict who checks her phone every few minutes. And the article says that according to addiction expert Dr. Lemke, Anna Lemke, our smartphones are making us dopamine junkies, with each swipe, like, and tweet feeding our habit. And I tend to agree.
Dr. Lemke is the chief of Stanford University's Dual Diagnosis Addiction Clinic, which caters to people with more than one disorder. Lemke has spent the past 25 plus years treating patients with addictions. She is a psychiatrist who has written books, delivered TED Talks, and appeared in the 2020 Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, to discuss the drug that is social media. She's a whiz on why we get hooked on things and how we can enjoy pleasurable things in healthier doses. According to the article, her new book, Dopamine Nation, emphasizes that we are now all addicts to a degree. She calls the smartphone the modern day hypodermic needle. We turn to it for quick hits, seeking attention, validation, and distraction with each swipe, like, and tweet. Since the turn of the millennium, behavioral, as opposed to substance addictions, have soared. Every spare second is an opportunity to be stimulated, whether by entering the TikTok vortex, scrolling Instagram, swiping through Tinder, or binging on porn, online gambling, and e-shopping. We're seeing a huge explosion in the number of people struggling with minor addictions, says Lemke, and that has consequences. Although we have endless founts of fun at our fingertips, the data shows we're less and less happy, she says. Global depression rates have been climbing significantly in the past 30 years, and according to a World Happiness Report, people in high-income countries have become more unhappy over the past decade or so. We've forgotten how to be alone with our thoughts. We're forever interrupting ourselves, as Lemke puts it, for a quick digital hit, meaning we rarely concentrate on taxing tasks for long or get into a creative flow. For many, the pandemic has exacerbated dependence on social media and other digital vices, as well as alcohol and drugs.
Yeah. Reading on, addiction is a spectrum disorder. It's not as simple as being an addict or not being an addict. It's deemed worthy of clinical care when it significantly interferes with someone's life and ability to function. But when it comes to minor digital attachments, the effect is pernicious. It gets into philosophical questions like, how is the time I'm spending on my phone in subtle ways affecting my ability to be a good parent, spouse, or friend? Says Lemke. I do believe there is a cost, one that I don't think we fully recognize because it's hard to see it when you're in it. And that is so true because I think probably most of our listeners probably have a smartphone. And if you have a smartphone, you probably have some amount of addiction to it because it's just the nature of the beast, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that we're seeing in students this reduced concentration time and the ability to focus. And also, this social interaction is greatly affected by cell phone use. And students are becoming less and less able to interact in healthy and effective ways.
Right. And I see it not so much where I am now, but I have seen it over the years just with my friends. You go out with your
Yep.
friends, and these are older people, and they are on their phone. Somebody calls them. Before, you would never do that. That would be rude. And you just talk on your phone and you're texting and you're doing this stuff. And I've done it too, right? I'll say, well, I'm sorry, I've got to text this person. But most of the time I won't do it. I will, when I'm with somebody, I'm with that person. But that's what we're doing. And I think it's really sad. I feel sadness. I've seen on the internet this picture, it's probably on Facebook or something, of this little toddler. And you see this little cute little toddler face, and they're looking up at their parent. You don't see the parent's face, but you see their hands, their little faces next to a parent's hand with a phone in their hands.
Mhm.
And it's basically, I don't remember exactly what the caption is, but something like, what are you teaching your children are important or something. And it is true. It's like we're all looking at our phones and it's teaching those kids this phone is to be worshiped, right?
Right. And
And
basically, yeah, that they're not important, that they're not
right,
as important as that phone. Yeah.
right. And the thing is because it isn't a substance that sometimes we just don't even see
Hmm.
how we're addicted to it and how it's harming us and how it's harming our relationships. But I am seeing how it's harder for me to concentrate for periods of time because my mind will wander to, oh, I wonder if somebody texted me. Oh, because I actually turn my ringer off, so I don't hear a lot of times if somebody's contacted me. I am recognizing how I have this minor addiction. Okay, so moving on. To understand addiction, you must first understand dopamine. So, dopamine is the chemical, sometimes referred to as the feel-good hormone. Rather than giving us pleasure itself, as is commonly thought, dopamine motivates us to do things we think will bring pleasure. As the brain's major reward and pleasure neurotransmitter, it's what drives us to seek pizza when we're hungry. Scientists use dopamine to measure the addictive potential of any experience, writes Lemke. The higher the dopamine release, the more addictive the thing. Yeah, I don't know where the social media phone rates on that, but obviously it's so available. It's it's got us hooked.
Hmm.
We experience a hike in dopamine and an anticipation of doing something, as well as when we do the thing itself, which makes us want to continue doing it. As soon as it's finished, we experienced a come down or dopamine dip. That's because the brain operates via a self-regulating process called homeostasis, meaning that for every high, there is a low, says Lemke. In this come down state, we really want that second piece of chocolate or to watch another episode, she says. But if we're not severely addicted, the craving soon passes.
And the article goes on to say, although dopamine was only identified by scientists in 1957, seeking pleasure is hardwired into our brains. With addiction, about 50% is down to genetic disposition, with the other 50% coming from environmental factors such as access, says Lemke. Our brains haven't changed much over the centuries, but access to addictive things certainly has. Whereas our ancestors put all their efforts into seeking a mate and tasty food, we can find those and much more besides with the click of an app. When we binge on pleasurable things, homeostasis means our brain compensates by bringing us lower and lower and lower, says Lemke. Each time the thing becomes less enjoyable, but we eventually become dependent on those stimuli to keep functioning. We spiral into a joy-seeking abyss. The digital world enables binging on a previously unseen scale because there are no practical limitations forcing us to pause. But with substances, you naturally run out of money or lines of cocaine, even temporarily. But Netflix shows or TikTok feeds, often you needn't do anything. The next hit automatically loads on your screen.
Isn't that true? Right? Or
That
you're
is
watching
so true.
something and then it says next movie is loading or the next episode or something. Like you don't have to do anything. You just sit there. And
I know, I know. I could just scroll. I could watch horse jumping. I could watch something like a competition, a horse competition, or a riding competition, anything. I can continue on with any subject I like, just hopping around, watching things that I like and give me enjoyment.
the incentive is not to put a stop to it.
Right. As well as compromising our attention spans, Lemke says our obsession with instant gratification means we're constantly living in our limbic brain, which processes emotions rather than in our prefrontal cortex, which deals with future planning and problem solving and is important for personality development. When we're confronted with a complex or unsettling issue in our work or social lives, our digital companions are always there to help us escape the stickiness of life with an easy distraction.
Oh, isn't that true? Right?
Yep. And the version of life presented on screens removes all the rough edges, Faces are filtered and beautiful. There's no awkward silences. And if we don't like what we see, we can simply click on another tab. It's very different from how life used to be when we had to tolerate a lot more distress, says Lemke. We're losing our capacity to delay gratification, solve problems, and deal with frustration and pain in its many different forms. So evident in our society today.
Right. And even just like boredom, right?
Hmm.
You become creative through boredom, through not doing anything. And we don't even have that anymore because we just look at our phone.
Hmm.
Look at the
Exactly.
phone. Look at the phone.
We just so used to being entertained that we don't have time for creative thought.
The reporter states, during our interview, I confess in passing to having an unhealthy attachment to my iPhone, checking it every few minutes like a compulsive tick. Sound familiar? Lemke is having none of it. She wants me to abstain from using it for at least 24 hours by locking it in a drawer and going out. The first 12 hours will be filled with anxiety and FOMO, or fear of missing out. But as time unfolds, I'll experience a sense of real freedom, will gain insight into my relationship with my digital companion, and will resolve to get back to using it a little differently. So, this is something I've thought about doing. So, the author of this article has a phone addiction, and that was what Dr. Lemke told her to do was to abstain from using for at least 24 hours, and you have to make it inaccessible. So she said, lock it in a drawer. Want to kick your habit? Like my phone in locked drawer situation, you should start with a period of fasting. This is the author writing. From 24 hours up to 1 month, the longer the better. Make sure you can't access a thing during the first 12 hours when cravings are most acute. Willpower is only so strong. So, this is something that I definitely want to do. I want to take a 24-hour period.
Mhm.
I got to plan for it because I got to make sure that I don't need my phone. And then I have to tell my children, not that it's likely that they would contact me, but I have to tell them that, hey, I won't be in contact for 24 hours
Mhm.
and then put it somewhere where I can't access it and then go from there. So this is my encouragement to anybody listening who realizes, hey, I have a problem with my phone also.
Well, I think you're right, Ellie, and I think that if we're all very, very honest with ourselves, that we'd have to say that we do rely on our phone much more than we should. I think maybe I could do it for 24 hours, although I would definitely find it difficult for days, and especially with the work that I do. But I think that I'm with you. We don't really take notice of how much we use our phone unless we're cognizant of that and really focus on that. I think maybe another good way would just be to write down actually how many times a day we do use it and how long we actually are on it. And I'm sure we'd be pretty surprised how many times that is pulled out of our pocket or put somewhere and we pull it out of there and use it. How many minutes are wasted in the day, I think, when we could use those definitely in other ways. And I think you mentioned before, and we were talking before, that how much time is wasted when we could be sitting with the Lord and when we're not in prayer and when we're not studying the Bible or when we're not speaking with other people about his word or doing some sort of evangelical work. It's a real shame to see how many hours we're actually wasting.
Right. Also, just creativity, which I think as we continue with this article, they're going to talk a little bit about that. But just creativity. I'm losing so much time that I could have been doing something more productive than being on my phone, and I see that. And it happens, you pick up your phone to look up for one bit of information, and then
Yep.
15 minutes go by, 20 minutes, and then you get off and you realize I never found that information that I originally picked up the phone for
No.
because there's just so much on there that reels you in. Again, this is how I realized I have this addiction that I need to deal with because I'm finding that happening all the time. And so then that's 20 minutes that was just stolen,
Right.
right?
Never going to get it back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going on, with the article. It says, the purpose of that time away, says Lemke, is to reset our brain's pathways and gain perspective on how our dependency affects us. Yeah, exactly. The goal is generally not to banish it forever, because it's probably not realistic that we're not going to use our phone,
Right.
but to figure out how to enjoy it in moderation, that most elusive of things. Some will realize they cannot enjoy it without going too far, but usually self-binding, in quotes, techniques should help
Mhm.
with finding a balance. You might try putting barriers between you and the device, like removing all screens from your bedroom, putting your phone on airplane mode, or committing to only using the thing at certain times, like at weekends. These will be
Mhm.
more manageable after your initial fast. It's easier to go from abstinence to moderation than from excessive consumption to moderation, says Lemke. Mm, yeah. We have to think about what could be my self-binding techniques. That's kind of
Right.
difficult. Yeah.
Right. I know we discussed that at work too. And some of the things that people are using just to have like a time frame. I don't use it from Friday night at 6 o'clock until Sunday night at 6 o'clock, and just having those kind of boundaries.
Yeah. I know my daughter, every so often, she would take a break from Instagram, which was the thing that she was on the most of the time. And so she would just say, hey, bye, everybody. I'm going to be gone for a month. And she would remove it from her phone.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
then she would still had the account, but she would remove it from her phone. And then after 30 days, she'd put it back on there and then catch up. But I guess it would build up where she felt like I needed to get away from this.
Hmm.
So again, this is what Dr. Lemke suggests. After that 30-day period, then you can use it in more moderation. So when you start seeing that it's taking over, it's stealing that time, it's keeping you from being productive or creative, etc.
Hmm. Right.
Okay.
So back to the article. It's crucial to take time to just be. Scientific studies have observed the importance of resting mental networks, meaning that in between activities, people demonstrate a synchronicity between different parts of the brain that has its own rhythm and breathing, she says. It's likely that the state contributes to original ideas and a general sense of wellness, like the Dutch practice of Nixon, which involves setting aside time each day to do nothing. It's about being still with your thoughts.
There's just like, that's really what, as Christians, right,
Hmm.
we should be doing. We
Right.
need to be pondering our path. We need to have that time
Yeah. Time
to
for
meditate.
reflection.
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
absolutely.
And many of these ideas are familiar, she continues. We've all heard about digital detoxes and mindfulness practices, but unlike many spiritual gurus, Lemke is straight shooting. She is not promising sunshine and rainbows. Yes, it's natural and healthy to pursue enjoyment, but our consumer culture has created an expectation that life is supposed to be so fun, she says. And really, it's not. Life is a slog. And I think if we could admit that and take comfort in knowing we're not alone in the day to day struggle, paradoxically, we would be happier. It's a sobering thought because the bounty of high octane stimuli enables us to instantly boost our mood, something previous generations couldn't do to the same degree. We're under the impression we can fully control when we feel joy. In reality, our drip fed, tech fueled bliss is fleeting and often less than blissful. The main message is to stop hunting for pleasure all the time. It's too much of a good thing and all that.
Yeah. And that's
That's all.
biblical
Sorry.
too, right? Because we're going to have trials in life. The Lord
Hmm.
tells us we're going to have trials in our life, and they're actually a good thing,
Hmm.
right? We grow. And so, and I think addictions, almost all addictions, they end up being an escape,
Right.
an escape from life. And
Hmm.
then they take away from our life because we're not really living life, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. And I think that there is something to be said about every day has its blessings and its joys. And as Christians, we're to walk that out. But sometimes life is also difficult and challenging. And it can't always be party. It can always be, yeah, a lot of fun. There are certain times when we're under correction and we're under guidance and we need direction. So, yeah.
I just thought, did you ever watch Star Trek? The old
Yeah,
Star
for
Trek. I just remember this episode they did because at the time it was like the 1960s, I think, when Star Trek existed, the original Star Trek.
sure. Right.
And they had the whole drug culture. And they had this episode where they go to this like paradisical, is that how you'd say it? An island that's like paradise. And do you remember this episode?
Oh,
And
is it the one where they wore the funny costumes
I don't know. They
and they
just
all
like everybody's happy and there nobody works and they're all like happy. And I don't know if they're like taking drugs or something or if there's something there in the air or something
Hmm.
because it's been probably decades since I've seen the episode. But
Right.
the whole thing, the whole point of the episode was that at the end, everybody's so happy and that they realize the probably Captain Kirk, nobody gets any work done. It was supposed to be about the problem with taking drugs, is that you're not living real life, nothing gets done. This just reminded me of that. Is that idea when we're thinking we're just looking for pleasure and we don't do any work and nothing gets done.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely true. Absolutely. People are doing less and less, and we see that. Hmm.
Lemke is sanguine that we can beat our digital dependencies by embracing a more monastic mindset. She advocates replacing some pleasure-seeking vices with painful pursuits.
Ooh.
When we do things that are challenging, going for a run, having an ice bath, which I'm not doing, talking to a stranger, reading a book on philosophy,
Mm.
instead of receiving a dopamine boost beforehand, we experience it afterwards. And doing things that are hard is one of the best ways to pursue a life worth living. Because the pleasure we get afterwards is more enduring, she says. We tend to forget that earned highs are that much sweeter. Well, this is just proving the Bible, right?
Absolutely.
Just proving the Bible. So, just opening yourself up to the realization that you shouldn't expect to be dazzled 24/7 seems like
Uh-huh.
a feasible shift in thinking, as does letting your mind wander uninterrupted with
Mm.
increased frequency. Don't look at the phone. Just remember, it all starts with a phone in a drawer. Yeah. Wow. It's so funny that we found this article because it just so addresses all those issues. So we will have information on the article and Dr. Lemke's book, Dopamine Nation, in the show notes.
So we don't want to be preachy, but as Christians, we should view everything through the light of God's word. And for that reason, we'd like to share some scriptures that we believe apply to what we've discussed today regarding phone addiction and the information in this article. Regarding loving pleasure, Proverbs 21:17. He who loves pleasure will become a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not become rich. And in 2 Timothy 3:4, Paul says that in the last days, perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof.
And if we are pleasure seeking, just like we mentioned in the Star Trek episode, then we're not working. We don't want to work. We avoid work. Second Thessalonians 3:10 says, "For even when we were with you, we used to give you this order. If anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either." Colossians 3:22 says, "Whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men." And as far as addiction is concerned, it can be a form of idolatry. Exodus 23 says, "You shall have no other gods before me." And idolatry can be defined as treasuring anything more than God. A phone addiction, even as a minor addiction, is really an escape from the life the Lord has called us to live. And it can be used by the enemy to distract us from our calling, from developing and maintaining good relationships, and from intimacy with the Lord. Hebrews 12:1 says, "Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." 1 Corinthians 9:24 through 27 says, "Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way as to take the prize. Everyone who competes in the games trains with strict discipline. They do it for a crown that is perishable, but we're doing it for a crown that is imperishable. Therefore, I do not run aimlessly. I do not fight like I am beating the air. No, I discipline my body and make it my slave, so that after I've preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified. I don't waste time on the phone. I don't allow it to steal my time. I don't allow it to hinder me from my relationships with people or my relationship with the Lord."
And then the issue of self-control, which is a fruit of the Spirit. We find in Galatians 5:22, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law." And regarding detoxing from our phones and being quiet before the Lord, giving time for our minds not to be entertained, we need to be still before God. In Psalm 46:10, it says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." And in Psalm 119, verse 15, "I will meditate on your precepts and regard your ways." In Psalm 42:1b, "As the deer pants for the waters, so my soul pants for you, O God." And in Joshua 1:8, "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have success."
Ephesians 5:15 through 17. "See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is." And so we really need to be mindful of our time. We are running a race, and we should put aside everything that hinders us. We need to watch the path of our feet, and all our ways will be established. Proverbs 4:26. We hope these verses are helpful and insightful in viewing the information that we've shared in this episode today. Sisters, we want you to view this minor but widespread addiction to our phones through Christian or biblical eyes. And we should ask the Lord about where each of us stands in relation to our phones and whether our devices are hindering our walk and service to Him. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please share any thoughts that resonated with you from today's podcast episode in our private Facebook group at Jesus People Sisterhood Community. Start reaching out to other single women and create your local group of Jesus People Sisters. Please let us know about your group to add to our directory by contacting us at support@JesusPeopleSisterhood.com.
Have you had a good experience with a business? They've treated you honestly and helped you at a reasonable price? Please let us know. We would like to start a directory of JPS-friendly businesses. Let's care for one another.
Be blessed by Him who is able to protect you from stumbling and to make you stand in the presence of His glory, blameless and with great joy. Until next time. Hey, sister, before you go, thank you for listening. If you found value in today's podcast, the best way to say thank you is by leaving a 5-star written review at Apple Podcasts. That raises us in the rankings and helps other sisters find us too. And please tell a friend or post it on your social media. If you're a single Christian woman over 50, this podcast was created specifically for you. The Jesus People Sisterhood is your community to find support and friendship with other sisters who can understand. Be sure to follow us on your podcast app and join our free private Facebook group at Jesus People Sisterhood Community.
Jesus People Sisterhood has also started a private Facebook group for housing and co-living opportunities. You can check that out at Jesus People Sisterhood Senior Housing. You can also find us on Facebook at Jesus People Sisterhood and individually for Janine at riseupcoachingandconsulting.com and for Ellie at samaramountain.com. And ladies, this is the necessary disclaimer. Our podcast content is for informational purposes and does not constitute professional advice for mental health, medical, legal, financial, or other areas. The opinions of the guest do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the hosts. It is our heart that this podcast will be a blessing to you. Together, let's build a powerful sisterhood with Jesus. Make a friend, add a sister, across the border and around the world.